May I invite two extremely distinguished speakers, and we are very privileged that they are both here with us today. Dr. Muzaffer Ahmed is currently with the National Disaster Management Authority. He has the status of Minister of State, has been extensively involved with disaster management, actually from a variety of areas, from medical sciences and dealing with response mechanisms, right on to the Kargil conflict and various other initiatives that he's been part of. And Mr. A.L. Roy would not certainly need an introduction to Mumbaikars, having been Director General of Police of Mumbai and an IPS officer with a string of credits to his CV. Both the CVs are there in the booklet, and we are going to have both of them talk to us about need for training for emergency response, as it's turning out between what Mr. Pillai has rightly brought out and has again come out with the presentations just before this. The training is crucial. So let us now invite Dr. Muzaffer Ahmed to kindly give us his wisdom, and then the next speaker, Mr. Roy. And at that stage, I'll invite Mr. Dholin also to chip in, and then we can have a nice, wonderful, comprehensive end to the morning session before we go on to lunch.
And emergencies which the country is facing. You know, globally and all over the world, there have been disasters and emergencies which have been faced from time to time. And when we talk about these emergencies, it is the developing countries which face mostly these emergencies because of one problem or the other. Disasters, natural or man-made, are common throughout the world, and losses due to natural disasters are 20 times greater if we take to percentage of GDP in the developing countries. When we talk about the economic and human impact of disasters, for the last 12 years, more than 1.1 million people were killed, 2.7 billion people around the world got affected, with the $1.3 trillion damage all over the world. These are the figures which UN has given. And when we talk about the region, it is the Asians which bear the brunt, both for natural as far as the man-made disasters. And if we talk about whether the last year's tsunami, Iran earthquake, there have been increased in the trends in the disasters over the years, and 90% of the natural disasters related deaths occur in developing countries. If you see the mortality figures in Haiti and Chile, Haiti, the deaths occurred were more than 250,000 people, whereas in Chile, immediately after 1 month severe earthquake, there were hardly 6,000 deaths, because the Chile was well prepared, their capacity was very well, they were very well trained to look after their emergencies and disasters. And when we see about the phenomenon, the other risks which we have now, whether it's the problem of rising sea levels, the migration of people from rural to urban areas, biological hazards, pest infestations, human disease, pandemics which are of other new viruses coming all over the world, which are on rise. And when we talk about our country's vulnerability, what we have, more than 58% of our landmass is prone to earthquakes. We have problem of drought, which is we get almost every second or third year. We have people who are prone to floods and erosions. In fact, Assam floods in UP, floods even in Rajasthan, which we are facing. Then we have a large coastline which is prone to tsunamis and cyclones, and a lot of government revenue losses there. And when we talk about the states, hardly any state is left for any disaster or emergency. Either whether if you see the last what happened, the Bhuj earthquake, tsunami, Kashmir earthquake in 2005, cyclones, Leh cloud bursts in 2010, then Jaipur oil depot fire, Bhopal gas tragedy, again a big tragedy which had occurred. And when we talk about the problems of urbanization, it again leads and increases our risk and vulnerability in areas, and this is the picture of what the country faced major natural disasters in the past, which has led to a number of deaths. And when we talk about other unnatural deaths in our country, road accident continues to be our big problem. And if we see the National Crime Record Bureau data, more than 1.50 lakh people die on spot, which are reported. And the others who are taken to hospitals is 4 times more in hospital who die on the 4th day or 5th day of the hospital, which again leads to the deaths. And when we talk about the emergencies or disasters, the definition of disaster as a catastrophe has been well defined in our Disaster Management Act 2005, which defined disaster as a catastrophe, mishap, calamity, or grave occurrence in any area arising from natural or man-made causes, or by accidents, or by negligence, which results in the substantial loss of life, of human sufferings, or damage. There's a clear-cut definition, and when we talk about the types of natural disasters, we have geological, we have earthquakes, tsunami, volcanic landslides, mud flows, cloud bursts, then we have floods, meteorological, we have problem of tropical cyclones, rain wind, dust storms, land fires, forest fires, and biological outbreaks of epidemic diseases, outbreaks, insect plagues, and extensive infestations of these. And when we talk about the man-made disasters, these are chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, transport, urban flooding, rights, civic disturbances, terrorism, which has been mentioned. And when we talk about the level of response in an emergency or disaster management, there has to be levels. One level, local disaster response management, whether it is educate, support is required from regional resources, state headquarters, and third, whether it is required from the national resource from the national capital, and support, whether support is required from the international resources. But our efforts are that we should not go beyond our country level preparedness. And when we talk about our effective risk disaster management, we at the NDMA and at our nodal ministry, we say we should have a comprehensive approach plan for prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Well, our Act has given us an approach for paradigm shift from response-centric to holistic and integrated approach, which is backed by institutional framework and legal authority, supported by financial mechanism, and structure is, we have an NDMA headed by the Honorable Prime Minister at the national level. At the state level, it is headed by Chief Ministers, which is supported by National Executive Committee, secretaries of 14 ministries headed by the Home Secretary. And the powers are there, lay down the policies, approve national plans, lay down the guidelines, and coordinate enforcement and implementation of the policy, recommend provision of the funds for mitigation, lay down the broad policies for trainings. And we have the ministries which have been given, the nodal ministries which have been given the responsibilities of management of various emergencies and disasters. As far as the NDMA, large number of guidelines have been issued on various topics of importance, whether nuclear or radiological emergencies, biological, incident response system, which we have now, tsunami, drought, role of NGOs, urban flooding. There is a national policy on disaster management. And when we talk about what is the local capacity, you see, if you see a couple of years back, there was just 2 days of rain in Bombay created havoc. Whether the officials at the local level, they were caught unaware how to react to it, because we had no capacity that time how to cope up with. And are there any solutions? Yes, there are solutions by training, by preparedness, and by mitigation. And when we talk about the concern, which are our immediate concerns when any eventuality or emergency occurs, these are, besides search and rescue, first aid, transfer, evacuate to medical institution, restoration of essential services of water supply, medical services, electricity, communication, provision of minimum standards of relief in the camps by way of shelter, food, drinking water, disposal of the dead bodies, prevention of the epidemics, and debris removal. And these are our immediate concerns for which we need to create awareness, training, and education. These are the areas which are important. And how we do it? We have to have 3 levels of capacity: individual, organizational, and there has to be enabling environment for this. And when we talk about disasters, the first responders is a community. Whether a train accident occurs, whether it is an accident like what we had in Mangalore, or any other eventuality, it is the community who come much before any DC, Tahsildar, or even a local official comes. Then there are other emergency support functionaries, police, fire services, civil defense, home guard, youth organizations, NGOs, who are required to be given training in this. And what is essential is that for carrying out the essential components of disaster management, whether we have disaster action, rapid action teams, we have to have rapid mobilization, we have to have pre-position stockpiling, effective communication, and provision of funds and force multipliers. They have to be backed up by drills and procedures. And for carrying out all this, it is essential that we have trainings, not only for our armed forces. At NDMA level, we thought now all our CPOs, which are under the ministries, we have more than 9 to 10 lakh CPOs, CRPF, CPO. We are, although wherever they are posted in various locations, whether Naxalite, J&K, or whenever a disaster-like situation occurs, they move as a first responder. So we are in the process of training. We thought with the DGPs of all these that they need to be given training as first medical responders, which will not only help the country for during emergencies, but it will help them also. If they are in Naxalite areas, in other areas, they must know how to lift the patient, how to lift their fellows, and how to provide the basic facility medical care. We have NDRF, we have trainings are given by National Institute of Disaster Management. There are state disaster management centers in various administrative training institutes which have been established. There is need for training of Panchayati Raj institutions, for which IGNU, NDMA has given a project to IGNU that Panchayati Raj institutions are required to be trained. There is need for awareness campaigns, information, education, community communication campaigns in schools, emergency medical preparedness, school safety, which is again an important area, school safety, hospital safety, and chemical industrial disaster preparedness. Knowing what happened in Bhopal, our community, our people were not trained. I must tell you, there were hardly any deaths within the plant, but what catastrophe occurred was around the community. So what is required to be training and awareness among the community around the plant, and armed forces who are called when it goes beyond the coping up capacity of the civil administration. They help, and there is also further need for their training. And we have our National Disaster Response Force battalions, which are located in various locations, not only for response, but other at other times they have to interact with the community, giving them some sort of training. And I'll tell you, this force is a multidisciplinary, multi-skilled, high-tech force capable of responding to all emergencies, natural or man-made, even CBRN emergencies. And they have been trained in various international institutions, and they are exclusively allocated, exclusively deployed for this training and for this disaster management. When they have been deployed in number of emergencies, have done, whether it was Kosi flood or even boat tragedies, they have done a good work. And even last year, country sent them to Japan, where even the Prime Minister of Japan, when he came, he acknowledged their work, what was done during by them. And what is required is awareness among the people. Although NDMA has issued large number of guidelines, but unless and until we train our people at the ground level with regard to how they should manage before the other external aid comes to them, whether it is for earthquake, cyclone, floods, then they will be able to help themselves. And what country is lacking is our certified first medical responders or bystanders. If you are in America or Europe, anybody gets a heart attack or a road accident, this bystander, he will try to help him. He will give him a resuscitation, he will give him, and he will mobilize him. But what we have a biggest challenge is to creation of a first medical responders, which we don't have. A large number of people in our country die before reaching hospital. I'm telling you the figures. In developed countries, it is 1 in 200 people. If 200 people get injured or they meet an emergency, 1 person dies before reaching hospital. But in our country, 1 in 6. That is the situation where we say we must develop a cadre of certified medical responders at the community level, whether the college students, university students, factory people working in important installations. And also what is required is training for how to keep hospitals and vital installations safe, especially during emergency. You know what happened in Emory Hospital, Fire Calcutta. People were not aware how to take care. 90 patients, they died. So hospital safety is again an area of concern. How to train people, doctors, stakeholders for taking care in hospitals. If there's a terrorist attack, both internal problem in hospital or external, what happened in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, or whenever an emergency occurs, large number of we get relief supplies. How they should manage their relief supplies? Again, in any emergency disaster, identification and disposal of dead it's a big problem where people are required to be trained. We have guidelines, but training is required to be done, which I have mentioned about the mass casualty management, public health emergencies like swine flu. There is need, again, which is a disaster, there is need for having a good training programs, especially for hospitals, how hospitals should keep themselves safe, how they should react during emergencies and disasters. For emergency support functions, they are required to have at least mock drills minimum twice a year, backed up by mobile hospitals, which Home Ministry has also given the instructions to the Health Ministry to have backup hospitals at various locations. Since the time is less, I would also like to say that the school safety and hospital safety is an important, because in disasters, if we see in 2005 earthquake in Muzaffer, more than 20,000 children died. They perished in schools. Whereas luckily in Udi and Tangdar, our school timing was at 10 o'clock, whereas they had 8 o'clock, the number of children died. So school safety is an area of concern where we have to train teachers, we have to train students, we have to even train parents, how they should take, and even at the community level, there is need for training of all, not only the Panchayati Raj institutions, accredited health, social activists, then we have to have capacity development if anything happens in railway station, how we should train them to respond to any of the trainings. These are the mock drills and exercises which have been carried at various locations, and I thought I will share the need for training which is essential for meeting the challenges of disasters or emergencies. And also with regard to the urban emergency management exercises, we had one in Bombay, another in Chennai, which we'll be doing in all major cities to have further to see how they respond during the challenges. And I would also like to mention that in the 12th plan, there is a strategy for strengthening of our early warning system. There is mainstreaming disaster risk reduction into flagship schemes. Capacity building is a major area where thrust has to be given for trainings at all levels. Thank you very much.
May I now invite Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy tells me that most of the points that he wanted to bring out in the presentation, his own talk, have actually been covered in this very comprehensive and lucid account by Dr. Muzaffer Ahmed. But Mr. Roy, having been Director General of Police Maharashtra, personally will bring into play his own experiences. Mr. Roy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Raza. All that I would have liked to say has already been very comprehensively covered by my predecessor, my speaker. And a lot that was said by Mr. Pillai and Commander Solanki covers most of the issues that I would like to say in respect of emergency response and the need for training. However, having come, just a few points that I would like to make based on some little experience of my own dealing with such situations while working as Commissioner of Police Mumbai and Director General of Police Maharashtra. The impact of any emergency in the critical infrastructure power, you know, doesn't need to be repeated, affects everybody individually, every common man, affects movements, affects production. We had seen recently one big incident in North India and how it affected, how it even kind of influenced, how it was taken by the world community, globally covered in all cover pages of all major newspapers across the world, and presented a very poor image of India in darkness for nearly major part of 2 days. Emergencies in the power sector particularly can be of so many kinds, and our entire exercise depends on dealing with the emergencies will depend largely on how we anticipate this risk assessment, preparing ourselves, anticipating what can happen. A lot will depend, our entire response will depend on this. I'll show at the end, whatever, if we don't anticipate and we don't plan for it, what can cause us the most serious kind of challenges in dealing with this. Earlier, Commander Solanki did mention a little improvement in our terrorist situation. Well, that's marginally, yes, from before you have moved one step up, but the terrorist challenge, particularly to this critical infrastructure sector, continues to remain very high. Very likely that the terrorists have on target any of our major power sector infrastructure projects on their target. He showed you how critical and how vulnerable we can be in this, and hence that continues to remain a very high threat for us from the terrorist situation, as well as any acts of sabotage. Our entire emergency response mechanism will depend on how well we prepare for a war during peace. That's exactly what this emergency response preparedness is all about. very clearly we need to, in our emergency response planning, we need to delineate very clearly areas of responsibility, who will do what, who will call the exercise, the emergency response to be set in motion. This areas of what during emergency, obviously we are not in a position to, there's no time to think, there's no time to plan, there's no time to do any coherent, coordinated thinking and action, and hence the necessity for planning, having a very calibrated response mechanism planned in advance. There is no time for seeking orders, and hence we need to have a very clearly laid out chain of command, who will set the process in motion, who will control what, and that all need to know their roles and function, do their respective roles accordingly in a very coordinated, comprehensive manner. It's not the task of any one person, not the task of an emergency response cell, but it's entirely cross-functional exercise. I would leave all this has already been covered largely by the Disaster Management Act has, of course, very categorically, what it has done by all its action is mainstreaming of the emergency response. Earlier it was meant to be taken to be the responsibility of an emergency response cell or a small group of people, but it has done a lot of good in terms of mainstreaming this entire exercise of emergency response. Mitigation was largely covered. The committees, etc., which has been, authorities which have been placed at all levels, starting from the district level to the state level. And that has led to establishment of such committees, such cells, such authority being clearly defined and laid on people in every such organization. Like, for instance, in government, in every department, in every such project, every such area, there are very clearly defined committees, cells, authorities identified who are responsible for specific responsibilities. The entire success of any emergency response mechanism will depend on continuous training and its rehearsals. Like he showed earlier, the rehearsals, the mock drills which are carried out at different places. After each rehearsal, after each mock drill, the emergency response mechanism is a continuous exercise based on rehearsals, feedback, review, updation, and continuous training. This is the exercise that we need to carry out in order to make our emergency response mechanism effective. It is not the job of any one cell or a group of individuals, but it has to be the concern of all line functions in all areas of responsibility. Training, both institutional as well as on the job, which is very crucial. I'll just show you this example which he mentioned. This 26 July 2005, the unprecedented floods that happened in Mumbai. Mumbai, being on this sea surface, has never faced floods before that, and hence somehow all authorities, all concerned departments never really planned for a flood. And once you had this kind of flood happening completely unexpectedly due to a cloudburst situation, having 940 millimeters of rain in a few hours at a time of a high tide in the sea, and you had this situation confounded, when the entire city got flooded, and that led to this emergency in the power utility, particularly in the suburban area. the city was submerged. A large number of transformers of the utility in the suburban area got completely submerged, didn't function. Even after the floods receded in a few hours, thereafter you found all this electric supply completely disrupted for a long period of time, largely because of this unexpected submergence of their transformers. Now, based on this experience, yes, exercises were done, the utility worked on this very effectively, and in a short time they found, it took some time, but they found that yes, all these transformers had to be raised, they needed to have emergency, they needed to have spares for these things. At that time, suddenly so many were submerged that you could not even produce so many transformers in a short time. That is what emergency preparedness will do, that yes, you work out the requirement of your inventories, your manpower, your other resources that you would need to put in place when you have an emergency. And this is what did happen subsequently based on this experience. Now, based on any emergency response planning, but does need, as Dr. Muzaffer mentioned, having standard operating procedures. Procedures laid down, well thought out procedures laid down during peacetime, it will be what will come in handy at the time of an emergency. We, for instance, in police, do prepare emergency response planning in various ways. There are standard operating procedures laid out. Whenever you take recourse to these standard operating procedures, you have a different result. When you don't implement your own SOPs, then you know what happens, and then we don't need anyone else to tell us why our emergency responses fail. We in the police have definitely a lot of experience of dealing with this, and a lot of successes, and more than that, failures as well. A centralized control mechanism, a control room to coordinate the entire effort in emergency response is something, the need of which I would really like to underscore. In such a situation, often it has happened that different entities, different individuals, different groups operate independent of each other, pulling in different directions, and you find that that is not, it will not yield the desired results. Hence, having a centralized control to operate the entire emergency response from an organization will be something very critical. That is one recommendation I would really like to make. I think briefly, I have already, all of that was covered. There has been a lot of overlap, but this is the best that we can say in respect of emergency response planning. Training shall continue to remain the most critical area. Thank you.
I think it's clearly emerged in all the sessions that training is what we need. Ladies and gentlemen, another set of surprises for you. We are just carrying forward the next two sessions, and including the summing up, which will wrap up everything by 2 o'clock. We'll go for lunch at 2, with the intention that some of you will get time to do sightseeing in Goa before you take your flights out. So I'm not going to take more time by giving the floor open for question and answers. If you want to talk to them personally, please feel free to nibble their brains. I just want to thank both the speakers for their very, very extremely informative presentation and the outstanding bits of information that emerged from this. It's going to be a long way for all of us, but we've learned a lot, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Please give them a good hand.